Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 2 of Self Build and Renovation Live. This time we're doing a Meet the Experts, and I've got 2 of the experts here, and we're doing something a little bit different this time. Circumstances is that we're doing a hybrid show because we're also going to have somebody joining us remotely as well. First of all, if I bring out the cameras, because I want to introduce who is here with us, we are addressing funding a project, finding a plot, and planning permission. That's 3 areas that we're touching on. So, of course, I had to get the Managing Director of NSBRC, Harvey Fremlin. Hi, Harvey.
Hi, Chris.
Congratulations on the recent wedding, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, 10 days married, I think, today. So just whistle-stop tour back from honeymoon, but excited to be here.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to see you back as well. And then, of course, one of the big guests that we've got here is Mark Dudes, MRTPI. Is that right? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Because you're an independent planning consultant, and of course, you're a presenter here at NSBRC.
I am. Yes, I am. It's going on for 10 years now.
Yeah. I think it is. Yeah.
Wow, fair shout. So we're going to be picking your brains about all of that. So welcome, Mark. And I'm then going to bring in remotely up in Scotland. Let's bring him straight in. We've got Tom McSherry from Buildstore. Hi, Tom.
Hi there. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good to speak to you, my friend. Now, you're the National Business Development Manager at Buildstore, who I think it's safe to say are the market leader in self-build finance. Is that okay for me to say that?
No, I think that's a fair reflection of what we do. Absolutely. Yeah, and congratulations, Harvey, as well, formally.
Thanks, Tom.
There we go. You knew you weren't going to get away with that.
No, absolutely.
I was pleased I could bring a can back with me as well from the honeymoon.
Absolutely, it had to be done. First things first, Harvey, I want to turn to you because it kind of segues in the beginning and end. One of the big things that we're building up with these episodes to is October 11th is your big national self-build and renovation show. 23
days to go. So it's when it gets exciting now. So 2 or 3 weeks out, the bookings start to come in. So I think we've got approaching 500 people booked already to attend the 2 days, which is brilliant. So yeah, it's when the activity really ramps up. We've got a brilliant timetable of talks and masterclasses and demos and experts to talk to, and Mark and Tom, who have been associated with the centre for a long time. Tom since the very inception, actually back in 2007. As Mark was saying, Mark's been involved with us for over 10 years. So we've got, and they just a small sample of some amazing experts that we've got who are here to help people understand the various stages that they're going to be going through in a project, whether that's a new build, a renovation, a retrofit.
Because it can be intimidating, can't it?
It can be. It is a. We've said this before, Chris. It's this really steep learning curve that people are going to be going through. So to be able to have that reassurance of talking to people who really know their stuff, they do it day in, day out. I think that's really valuable.
And I think, Mark, you just made the comment about it being daunting. I've kind of identified the people that come to this show. The link is just here below us at the moment, and it's free tickets if you order. You go and book your tickets in advance. Is that either you're already, I'm definitely doing it, and it's daunting, or I've got a block on one particular subject, or I want to look further afield. Yeah. But there are people that are kind of going, I don't quite fancy that, but I have no idea what's involved. They're also to come along to these shows, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. So it's quite a journey. I think a journey is the best way to think of it. And sometimes you have to realise you want to embark on that before you do. And in terms of the planning input, I mean, obviously the raw ingredient for a house is the land, isn't it? It's a plot. And what we always say to people is, without that plot, it's just a dream. And in many ways, all the kind of interesting stalls and exhibitors that are behind me in the rest of the show, those are the kind of the retail end, but actually the fundamental ingredient is the land. You know, if you don't have a plot, if you don't have planning permission, you are just having a dream. So you need to engage with that part of the process as early on as possible. And the retail bit's fun, and that's great, and it has its role and its place. There's some really great products out there, but the raw ingredient, the most fundamental one, is that plot. So what we always say is focus on that.
Absolutely. And before I turn to Tom, What does MRTPI stand for?
So it means it's a designation to say I'm a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. So I'm a chartered, qualified, insured professional. And one of the things we've said lots of times, haven't we, is to make sure that if you are taking advice, to make the person that you are dealing with actually does have the qualification, because there's a lot of people in legitimate sister related fields, but they may not necessarily be chartered planners, and that could be a surveyor or an architect or some other field. But having a chartered town planner on board early on means you're going to get good quality advice that's in your interests. It might have some other vested interest in selling you something later on. A town planner should be acting in your interests.
Perfect, and we'll certainly have that. I'm going to turn it to you, Tom, at the moment. By the way, anybody that's watching, if you've got questions or comments, please type them in the comments of wherever you're watching, whether that's on the NSBRC Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn channels. Type them in, because we can put them up on screen and the guys can actually answer them live for you. But Tom, turning to you, first sort of big, deep question, I guess, in reality. It might be a very generic question here, but forgive me on this one, but how typically can people fund such a project, a self-build or a renovation project?
Oh, it's a good question, and it's part of that daunting journey that Mark just touched on, where the centre demystifies much of it actually and provides that independent advice. When the centre was originally formed in its design, when you entered it, it was the finance section before moving into the land section, and that was in a particular. The design of that was for good reason. Is you need to know your budget before you go searching for land or a barn for conversion or a renovation house, or before you even go in to design the house. But from a pure finance perspective, there's a number of ways. The TV programs do little to dispel the myth. People still think they have to sell their house and move into a caravan on site, but the reality is that the stage payment mortgage market is a very mature market, supported predominantly by building societies. I'm always quick to say the clue's in the name is why they were formed, and they can provide finance to mortgage an uninhabitable property, which again, many people think you can't get a mortgage if it doesn't have a functioning kitchen and bathroom, so it's a doer-upper. Barn conversions, self-build, custom build, which we may touch on. So there is a real depth of building societies who provide bespoke finance for projects just like this, and there's also a suite of products for a marketplace that I'm stepping all too close to, which is when you get too old to borrow in terms of a mortgage term. I don't have 25 years to borrow. The reality is I probably don't have 25 years, but but we may be in a position where many of the customers will be asset rich, but perhaps income poor. There is a suite of products again to meet the demand for those who are wanting to downsize, looking to design a house that's more suited to their family or their personal requirements at that stage of life, and perhaps want to, quite importantly, reduce the carbon impact that their family home has, therefore reduce the running costs. And if we reduce the running costs in retirement, of course, it makes life a wee bit more manageable. So there's a great depth of products and lenders out there, of which Buildstore manage and distribute many of them.
That's a good point, actually, because you've touched on a good point. I think one of the drivers that we come across as a practice for people to build their own home is to have a lower cost, lower carbon, lower cost future. So they're looking, they might be in an older property, which they might be spending hundreds and hundreds of pounds a month on electricity or gas. A new build property, particularly one that has renewable energy on, could be photovoltaics on the roof, will have a significantly lower monthly cost and a carbon footprint attendant to that. So that's a really good point you make there, Tom.
Yeah. There's different motivations.
Yeah, just more suits to retirement as well, doesn't it?
If you have so I mean, on the motivations, so at the centre we run our annual survey. So we're asking our visitors, why are you doing this project, and what are the things that are motivating you, what are the challenges, and the 3 reasons why people are doing it. whether it's a self-build or a significant renovation, pretty much always stay the same. So number one, it's designing and building something that's great quality, much higher quality than the kind of mass market, the volume house builders can provide in the UK. We all hear the horror stories of the big boxes being delivered on the edge of communities, and no one wants that really. So quality is number one. Number two, as Mark just said, it's about energy efficiency and building something that's really airtight, great insulation. You're designing out your energy consumption, really. And then thirdly, it's, as Tom mentioned, it's about building something that fits around your lifestyle and your family. Now, whether that's that you're expanding your family and you need more room for the kids growing up, or a home office, or you actually might be thinking about downsizing, as Tom mentioned, perhaps even having a granny annex on the side. They are the three reasons why people are doing it and walking through our doors.
Is there not, and I don't know who I would aim this question at, and I do apologise if it's a naive question from myself, is there not a fourth one of investment? Are people doing this where they're sort of building it to sell on?
So those wouldn't fall under the definition of a self-builder as far as the government is concerned. So self-builder is someone who is subdividing a plot or creating a plot and then going to erect their dwelling and then live in it for at least 3 years. You have to live in it for at least 3 years in order to be exempt from CIL payments, community infrastructure levy payments, which can be pretty significant. They could be anything from £20,000 to £60,000, which you're exempt from as a self-builder. But if you were to move out or sell within the 3-year period, then you would be eligible. You would have to repay a proportion of that back. So that's a really important point to make.
Because I guess you're not a self-builder. I guess the click from the title, you're a builder.
Yeah, you're a developer, aren't you?
Even if, because I've heard people that they've many different ways that they come into land, and they're kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to build this or these and then sell them off. And happy days, that's more than the land was on its own if I sold that. But that's a different gravy altogether. Do you guys get involved with people that have got this?
Yeah, I think we should probably put that to Tom, because that ability to have instant equity is absolutely viable. But Tom's the expert; should probably tell us.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's effectively self-building or custom building your own home. You're taking out that developer profit. And that's often retained by the customer doing it themselves. So there is an element of profit there which is retained in equity. And we will have many customers over the years who have repeated the journey, either to improve the property they're living in, doing it more than once, or to erode their mortgage, facilitating, 2 or 3 down the line, they may be mortgage free as they've used up the equity on the previous project. But we do have, a significant department within the business that looks after developers who are either building to sell or building to let. And that could be one-offs at a time, SME builders doing 3 or 4. And it probably dovetails in now to, we're starting to see a lot of, as custom builds evolved, developers who may have built houses to sell are now creating service plots with roads and services in, which then marries in for individuals coming in to take on their own plot and perhaps even have a design and build process with the contractor. So there is a crossover with custom build, and I think the sector probably moves between 10 and 14,000 self builds every year. Depending on where you take the information from. But there's legislation now in England that should help grow the sector, and the mortgage products, I think, will also do that with smaller deposits. Lenders up to 95% now is really important. But I think custom builds the opportunity where it will be volumized. And even those volume house builders that Harvey mentioned, many of the local authorities now have percentage policies within their planning. Mark probably could expand on it, where, yes, we'll give you planning permission for 300 units, but as part of this, you need to allocate 10 plots for self-build or custom build. So there's actually a marriage to the new build market now.
So you're right. Some local authorities have had for years, but some of the more recent ones going through a local plan cycle are in adopting policies which mandate a certain number of plots to be made available to the self-build market as part of a much bigger consent. And that is a double-edged sword, really. It's great to see local authorities trying to meet the needs of different groups within the sort of overall marketplace. But equally, self-builders generally, not all self-builders want to buy a plot on a much larger housing estate. And that also causes problems if you then come in for a particularly bold design, might be a glass and steel house, and you're surrounded by other houses built by a national house builder, which might be, you know, red brick and you know, concrete tile roof or whatever. You would then be coming in with something pretty discordant to how the street looks. So that's something to think to factor in. But the point that you made, Tom, earlier was really interesting. We've dealt with quite a few small sites for 3s, 4s, 5s, where our client wants to build one of those houses, but they want to then finance the building of that house and make a profit off of selling off 2, 3, 4 serviced plots to other self builders, and that's quite a popular and pretty lucrative option, because it means that you can sell the plots as plots and get a premium for that. You're having to build the road anyway for your own house, but of course it adds value to the overall sale, having all the roads provided, utilities provided, etc. So that can be a pretty good option, and of course I'm sure that would also be favourably looked upon by mortgage lenders, I'm guessing, because the plots you're selling, you're selling at a premium at the peak of their value.
Yeah, there's a real planning process for custom build, because what you have is a number of plots, and for the developers and custom build enablers, house builders that we've worked with, we effectively put a plan in place from the outset where we go out to the lenders and create a lender panel for the development. So there's no doubt that the mortgage solutions are there. So there's a pre-planned panel put in place, and sharing with them real detail around the planning stage, how the plots will be delivered, at what point is it outline planning, detailed, golden brick, and who the professionals will be, the materials being used, the superstructure. So we're removing all of the doubt and getting the support from the lenders right from the outset. And I think that's really important, so that you create a real certainty and remove bumps in the road for both the house build, the developer themselves, but the plot buyer. There's that new build market that unfortunately in the UK we're pretty embarrassingly sitting about. I think, Harvey, you probably do the surveys. There's about 10% of the UK housing is through self and custom build, where Norway, Germany, etc., are between 40 and 80%. We're definitely lagging behind. It's pretty poor. But I think custom build's the one that will bring us along, because we have, I suppose, been educated in a certain way that new builds, how our housing market's delivered. But there's that right move type customer who probably wants more choice, and the things that Harvey mentioned, better quality, lower energy bills, are not being provided that at the moment through there. But they perhaps think that the real end of self-build is a bit too scary for them. There's that middle ground where the roads are in, the services are in, there's perhaps house types you can choose from, there's a better quality. That middle ground might attract many of the traditional right move customers rather than the entrepreneurial self-builder.
And there are lots of providers that offer a sort of turnkey solution, don't they, Tom, where the self-builder, often say the heaviest thing you might have to lift would be a pen to write the check out. Because the word self-builder can actually have a huge spectrum, can't it, of people who, in the one instance just want to lift a pen to write a check, and on the other end want to do every single part themselves.
Yeah, which is a valid point, because I've always thought, this isn't an area that I'm likely to be able to get involved in, because I think of some of my old school friends and stuff that have gone into the trades, and you think, well, they're able to do a chunk of it themselves and then work out what else. But actually, we're saying that there is that opportunity that goes, no, it's not self as in Chris Dawes building it. It is.
It's really so that survey that I mentioned earlier. So the barriers, interesting, funding and financing, that does not appear in one of the top kind of challenges for people. It's planning, number one, frustratingly. It's finding the plot that we've mentioned, and then it's time. And so it might be that, so if you come to the show, you will see the demographic of our visitors coming to the show will be typically, not always, but typically couples, people in their mid-50s plus. Now that's partly because they're probably financially in a position to be able to take on projects, but crucially, they've probably got a bit more time actually to dedicate it to, because as we said right at the beginning, they're going through this steep learning curve. And internally, and I'm aware we've got potential visitors watching this now. So, but internally, we would kind of broadly group our visitors into 3 categories. So, one end you've got what we would class as a trader. So they might actually have a set of skills, a profession. They're in the trade themselves.
Groundsman or roofer.
Electrician, carpenter, any of those skills. Now, ironically, what typically happens is they kind of put their own projects to the back of paying customers. So they might save some money on their project, but it might take longer to actually get to the end result. The other end of the spectrum, as Tom mentioned, you've got what we would classify as kind of executives. So cash rich, time poor. They've got the finance ready, they've got the will and the desire to do it, and they're willing to do it.
Typically.
But they're full-time employees, they haven't got the time. So that's where your package companies, those providers really come into their own. But actually, somewhere in the middle, which is probably the most people that come to the centre, we would regard as project managers. So to a greater or lesser extent, they're involved in some of the decisions. They'll certainly be negotiating some of the contracts, either with the package company or with the contractors, builders on site. They'll be dealing with some of the trades. They'll be deciding what materials they want to buy, what materials is better for the builders to buy as well. But they will have some involvement in that project management process. So we offer a one-day project management course. So they're not going to be to be able to go out and offer their services as a project manager. But if you've planned a wedding, in my case, or a big party, or some kind of event, you can project manage a self-build. But people want to really throw themselves into it and understand those different processes.
It's a big investment financially, time, your future, everything. So I get that.
That's a good way of thinking of it, though. You're right, and that's my experience as well. You have a lot of people. You either have the kind of time-rich asset, or typically that might be a retiree who has kind of got lots of time, but is on a fixed income. And then there might be exactly like you say, the project manager side who are in the messy middle. It's called, isn't it? I've heard that phrase recently, where you're being pulled in all directions with your career and children, and then having to have another pretty major project of finding a plot, assessing it, buying it, whatever, and then going through the pretty long, it can be a very long planning process. And then go out to build it can be different. I mean, one of the things that Tom mentioned about service plots, of course, if you buy a service plot, you are making a major shortcut in your overall end-to-end timelines. So you are buying something where a lot of the headache has been taken out of the planning.
You're reducing some of the risk as well, because a lot of the risk in a project can, as Tom will know, lie in the groundworks and putting the utilities and foundations in place. So if that enabling developer has already done that work for you, you might be paying a premium for that plot, but a lot of the risk and the time has already been dealt with on your behalf.
Yeah, we dealt with a client in Buckinghamshire recently who bought a plot, bought some land with a view to getting planning permission. We did get the planning permission after a bit of a fight, but we got the planning permission, and then they had one of the conditions of a mortgage lender was to have a ground contamination report, which didn't come up in the planning system actually, but it turned out that there was trace elements of hydrocarbons. So there might be oil, or some might have been a garage use or something in there, and that one piece of news meant that you had to remove, I think it was about a metre to a metre and a half of soil throughout. Yeah, metre. Thank you. A metre throughout the whole site.
Wow.
And you can imagine that not only you are dealing with low-level contaminated land, you can't just go and dump it somewhere or take it to your local your refuse centre. You're talking about skips and skips and skips worth of likely contaminated soil, which you then need to buy new soil and bring it in. So actually, that was a huge piece of bad news for the client.
And that's going to have a direct impact on their budgeting as well.
Well, I mean, that actually does, and sort of like slightly off the structure that we were going to go with, but Tom really hit a point that I wasn't aware of there, that I'd always envisaged if I wanted to do a self-build renovation, I would have to be staying in that mobile home or whatever on the site. And it's interesting to see that. But To take it further then, to open it up, Tom, is that how, and it might be as much to you, Mark, is that how much of the sort of investigative work is done up front? So in other words, when we're talking about finding the plot, is there assistance there to kind of go, right, I think I've got a plot of land, but would this be suitable? Then if it is suitable, is the price of that land reasonable? What would it cost me to build on it? What do I need to borrow? I mean, for me, Tom, I'll start with you. That feels like a lot of unknown before I even have the confidence to start finding out even more detail about a plot of land.
Chris, it's a really good point, and I touched on earlier where the budget is so critical to the start of the whole journey. You know, the amount of times that we'll have clients turning up with detailed planning consent and drawings for a 300 square metre house who can afford to build a 200 square metre house that yet haven't got to their budget position really firmed up. So, you know, the centre and with the advisors, the ability to set that early on is really helpful. But the product design with the building societies equally help it. The lenders allow you to purchase the land with outline planning permission. I think Mark was indicating that client may have taken the gamble in some form to buy it before it had planning, and that there are huge gains to be made there because obviously they're buying for considerably less. But the lenders will require it to have minimum outline planning permission, with the subsequent stage releases being triggered with the detailed consent once that's there. But it's really important that, and I think what the centre does is does this naturally. There are industry experts that this is what they do every day. They're not general practitioners. And within Buildstore, yeah, absolutely. Within Buildstore, we've built a number of safety nets into our processes that help customers who go into this without true building experience or knowledge of many of these things. So setting the budget's that starting point. But when someone then finds a plot of land and provides perhaps an indicative set of build costs initially, we have a team of professional build specialists who take those plans and drawings to ensure that the customer's build costs that they're provided us with are sensible and will complete the build, including contingency. So even at the early stage, there is an additional layer of professional support that ensures that the build costs are sensible to start with. Because if they set off with that irresponsible to start with, that's an interesting TV program, but it won't get the project finished. And that's really what this is about: starting the journey with the end in mind, and putting the processes in place.
To give an illustration on that, it's quite often in the planning process you end up compromising in some way. So you would either have a slightly different design, or you'd have to have some off-site works or junction improvements. You know, it might be a poor visibility display on your site, and every sort of compromise step you make often can dramatically change what you actually how you end up building what you're doing, the building system that you're using. You might have in mind an ICF, so a concrete system, but due to the compromises made, you end up having to have a different system, which could be, you know, I'm just going to pluck numbers out of thin air, but it could be 10, 20, 30% more expensive to build, or the local authority at the last minute committee, let's say, and this is a real life example, slipped in a particular wood for a client that the councillors felt was particularly appropriate. But it turned out that wood was imported from Siberia. It was a particular type of larch, and you can imagine, you know, the cost of that was simply, you know, 3 times the price of something more locally sourced in the area. So you do need to dive into the detail and check everything. But Tom's mentioned earlier about, you know, the planning is probably a good point to talk about the different types of consents out there. So you can have, you know, a hybrid consent is one that people don't often realize. You can go for full plan permission on one plot and get outline permission for 2, 3 or 4 other plots. So that's the style of permission which we submitted where the client was selling off those service plots. So that way somebody has a product they can sell, the outline permission for the plot, but they also have the full details sorted out for their plot. That's called a hybrid application. They're relatively unusual. But if someone's self-building a barn conversion, then you wouldn't necessarily need a full planning permission at all. You might go for a Class Q application. And really that depends, which is a type of prior notification application, which is still a planning application, but it's a different type of one. Or if the local authority has a particularly favourable full planning permission policy, we often wouldn't go down the Class Q route and go for that instead. So notably in this area, Cotswold District Council have a very good conversion policy for barns. So we don't tend to do Class Qs at all. Obviously, a lot of the Cotswold District Council is area of outstanding natural beauty, so you're not eligible for Class Q, but not by no means all of it is. And equally,
unless you're Jeremy Clarkson.
Unless you're Jeremy Clarkson. Or then there's the Vale of White Horse, who have a really positive policy, which would mean we don't often do Class Qs within Vale of White Horse.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting with Jeremy Clarkson was it kind of showed everyone the frustrations of that local planning process, didn't it? So, and some of the kind of small-minded decisions or short-sighted decisions that are made without like kind of being able to see the greater impact of that project. So I think kind of listening to Mark and Tom, and this is when we were kind of creating this episode, it's already coming across loud and clear. And it's something that I must remember to say is that what Tom mentioned is so important about the first thing you do actually if you're embarking on one of these projects is you build a team of people around you that are going to support and help you through the process. And the reason you do that is you cannot be expected to have all the knowledge that these genuine experts have yourself. So build that team of people around you who are experts and also interested in what you're doing, interested in your particular unique project. Now, those experts are going to charge a fee. They have to pay their own mortgages and feed their kids, and they will charge a fee. But the value, and you can hear it from the information that Mark and Tom have just given us in the last 20 minutes, it is so valuable, and it will save you so much more money than you're spending on those fees. So when you're working out with Tom and the guys from Buildstore what your budget is, you do need to not be surprised by some professional fees and make sure you're building that into your budget, because that money will reap the benefits many times over.
A good example of that is, and I agree with you, I think to go from sort of field to having building control approved plans, you need to budget for in the order of 6 to 10% of the build cost that you've got in mind. So if you have a budget of £300,000 or £400,000, then you're looking at 30 to 40,000 to go from no planning permission through to getting a permission, discharging the conditions, getting building control approval, and all of the relevant certification around that. And a good example is exactly like you say, is often with building control drawings. I mean, I'm a town planner, so we work with architects to produce building control construction drawings. But a good example is if investing in great drawings early on can actually save you quite a lot of money, because an architect can value engineer a build. And then if you go to tender, if you don't specify all of the details necessary, you'll find if you go to tender with 3 or 4 construction companies, they're all going to work on the worst case scenario. Right. But if it turns out you have specified something that isn't the worst case scenario, actually you'll get a more competitive price, because often people won't climb down from those prices when they realise, oh, we didn't go for that type of pile. We budgeted for a piled foundation rather than a slab foundation, say. So investing in building control drawings, construction drawings, once you have plan permission, is often something that pays for itself several times over, because they are costly. They are a costly chunk of money to spend, but actually often it saves you the money in the medium term.
Which I think it's really worthwhile, because these are really important parts of that whole budgeting journey, because whether it's engineers, planning, architects, site insurance, lawyers, valuers, there are professional costs that don't physically go into the building of the house that come out of your savings. You pay for them. And it sounds like a bit of a disadvantage. However, it's potentially exempt from VAT. So if your contractor shouldn't charge that, and if you buy materials, there's a VAT reclaim process at the end of the build. But even more significantly, the stamp duty is only applicable in the purchase price of the plot of the land. And I mean, as an example, just now, one of the custom build sites we're funding, the stamp duty is £7,500 for the plot. if it was based on the end value of the house, it would be £81,500. So you know, please don't be caught by the fact that, oh, this is expensive to do, which is often the perception. Some of the benefits far outweigh in terms of stamp duty, VAT reclaim, the ability to design your own home, and long term reduce the running costs of the house against what you would have buying off a volume.
And often, Tom, I know it's not a town planning point, but when people talk about things being costly, they often make false comparisons. So they'll say, well, that's expensive, and then but compared to what? My alternative is what? Is it buy a house that probably isn't going to be particularly energy efficient? I will need to retrofit solar to, or better insulation or cladding or whatever it is, or make a modification because it doesn't have the annex that I wanted or the downstairs kitchen diner that I wanted. Whereas when you're building a new house, you are building what you want.
It's your design.
To your specification.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's important to compare like for like when making those value calls.
And individual self-builders can actually have an advantage when they're looking at buying a plot against a local developer, because that developer is going to be building to turn a profit, whereas a self-builder is building to probably live in there for many years to come. So they don't need to build in that profit.
He's also got to pay SIL as well. Remember?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so self-builders will have a competitive edge on some plots.
Yeah, you're right. And that SIL point is important as well, because if, you know, small builders have experienced real pressure in the last 10 to 20 years. And one of the reasons is that the planning system has become more complicated and costly to interact with. And so the cost typically of preparing, say, a scheme of 3, 4, 5 houses is pretty comparable to a scheme of 15 to 20 houses. You know, you still need a highways report, you still need your ecology reports, you still need drainage or percolation or heritage report or archaeology. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter completely, but they're very comparable costs whether you're building a couple of houses or 10 to 15. So that small to medium sized builder has become particularly pinched in the middle.
And I think one of the key things to emphasize here is that this episode is not going to be giving you all the answers right now. It is sort of letting you be aware that this is more doable than you might think.
Yeah.
There are a whole load of experts available, and what the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre does here is brings everybody and everything together under the one roof. I mean, you will hear noise in the background of our episode here, and we make no apologies for it, because you've got a big event going on here at the NSBRC. You guys are going to be giving lectures at the event on the 11th and 12th of October. There constantly is all sorts of things. Plus, if you need to rent it, by the way, you can rent it for your own events here as well. And then they're coming out for lunch in a second. But I've noticed the first thing they're doing is wandering around everything that is here, people to speak, people to look at. And I think that was, Harvey, you and I, when we spoke about this episode was meet the experts, get the conversations going, and know that you can come on those 2 days or one of those 2 days and listen to more detailed conversations, create the connection to go and follow up on those bits and pieces. And I wanted to just, again, make sure, don't feel overwhelmed, even with what we're touching on now and maybe not going as deep as you would like. These guys can take you as deep as you need to. And the show is a good place to start.
And the show is obviously, that's coming up in a few weeks' time. But of course, the beauty of the centre is it's here all year round. So we're open to the public Tuesday to Sunday, and we've got a calendar of workshops, courses, other shows.
Market days,
all the time. So every month there's kind of 2, 3, 4 things happening. And it isn't unusual for visitors, if they find us at the early stage of a project, to come back 12, 15, 20 times, because there is so much to see here, so many people to engage with. And that's what's lovely about the centre. It's just this kind of hub. It's the hub of the sector, really. Yeah. And it just brings people together. And it's just so lovely being able to kind of facilitate that, make introductions, and then see people who have arrived with a few sketches a couple of years ago. They're now coming in showing us photos on their iPads of what they've achieved and what they're now living in. And it's just it's amazing.
That I really enjoy. So it's really great to see people coming back, and you'll see someone at a show and you might recognize them and call them over, or they'll come over to me. And I would have helped them 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, and they're at the point now where they're choosing their roof tiles or they're choosing their home entertainment system, and they've come back. And it's really nice, actually. The number of people that you see coming past my desk.
So rewarding, I can imagine.
Oh, it's brilliant. And it you kind of do, we get quite close to a lot of our visitors as well. So a couple of shows back in January this year, actually, there was a couple who I'd recognized. They've been to the centre a few times. I know they've been on some of our online workshops that we'd run. And the lady was in tears. So I sat down at our coffee shop. So I walked over and said, is everything okay? And she said, yeah, look, we've just had the email through. We've got planning permission today. So whilst they were at our show, they had their planning consent approved. And I think it was partly tears of frustration because planning had not been easy, but also relief that that's it. They got past that stage. They'd been resilient and persevered with it. And now they could go on and build their home. And it's a really exciting thing to be able to share that journey. As you said, it is a journey with people. And as Tom says, it is frustrating that in this country, it is only kind of 10% of all new homes are self-built, but that's still a significant number. And then if you add on the renovation projects, and we see some, really exciting, significant renovations as well through the centre, that is obviously much bigger as a market as well. So it is always a kind of hive of activity.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's why we love the shot that we were going to get here. I mean, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to go through some of these points a little bit quicker, just to give people a little bit of a tidbit of information on it. You mentioned, Tom, about budgets. Now, how do people really come up with a budget if they're not fully understanding the entirety of a project? How do they make sure they understand it properly, and how do they avoid going over budget?
Yeah, great question. And the latter part of it, of course, makes, as I said, for a good TV program. I mentioned those processes that we put in place. We have a team who specifically look after that early engagement to help the client calculate the budget. That's a free service. Please, those of you listening, don't pay anyone for that. We have a team who will specifically look at your income, your affordability, which will allow us to work out how much they can borrow. That, along with their savings, gives us the big pot. That's the total budget to deliver either the purchase. So for those that already own a project, there's two pots, which is your professional fees that Mark touched on and the construction costs. For those looking to buy a site, whether it be a barn or a renovation or a plot, it's the purchase, the professional fees and the build costs. So let's get the big pot worked out to start with. The second stage is ensuring the build costs are responsible. It's unfortunately still the case where people think that they can build a house because they've got mates in the trade at £1,250 a square metre. The reality is we went through a pretty difficult period over the last 2 years with an increase in material costs and a shortfall in materials, which just pushed costs up. So starting with a responsible set of build costs, and the professionals and suppliers that are in the centre permanently can help the customer with that. But then building in contingency. No one sets out to do one of these projects with problems in mind or getting it wrong. We've already touched on difficult ground conditions. If it's going to go wrong royally, it's problematic ground conditions is likely to be what it is. But beyond that, it tends to be a gradual creep. I'm currently sitting in the house that I built a number of years. I say I built. That spectrum that Mark spoke about, I can change a light bulb. So I'm still classed as a self-builder. I'm at the end where I brought a team of people in who were really good at it, and so I didn't make a complete mess of it. But I'm classed as a self-builder. But depending where you are on that spectrum of DIY to turnkey fixed price, it'll change the price and it will change the contingency. And don't be scared to build in 20% contingency, because if you don't spend it, it's not drawn down from the lender. They never pay for it. It's simply a facility. So build in contingency. And what we probably haven't done justice to the centre, and what I think is just the pièce de résistance, is the renovation house. People go into renovations and barn because they think, it's a new kitchen and bathroom and licky paint. And until you unravel the building, you don't discover it's hanging together with cobwebs until you've got the floors up and the walls out. Definitely you want a bigger contingency at that end of it. So so the renovation part of the centre is significant, I think, and really letting people understand that build in healthy build costs, but we have a team there that will guide the customer through this self-build journey to ensure that the costs that they've got are responsible. And it might just be signposting things where the builders perhaps using PC sums that might not even be responsible. If I'm building a 300 square metre house, you're not putting a £7,500 kitchen in it. So don't put silly numbers in. It's getting the numbers right to start with. And by getting the professionals to guide them early in the journey, then we're often setting them off with a greater opportunity to bring it in budget and without major bumps in the road. There's always going to be challenges. You know, it's a construction project, but we can take the big bumps in the road out by planning and working with the right individuals. And I think setting the budget initially, Matt, you mentioned value engineering. If the budget's there and the architect's working, or the package supplier that might be working within that budget, there may not be a need to value engineer. They may be, you know, the reason the house builders build boxes is it's cheaper to build than something that's shaped like an H. So don't let the design get too complicated where it's been designed on the budget to begin with.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And it comes back to the report that's put up and the depth that you'll go into that removes the worst case scenario. It's like, no, that is the case scenario, and people then know.
So I mean, people, I suppose it's part of the human condition that you're very optimistic, isn't it? You think, oh, that's not going to affect my site, and that is, you know, that's understandable, but you do need to be realistic. And I think town planners can add a lot of value there, because a town planner might know, well, we know there's bats in that area or that part of the village, or we know that there's a clay substrata soil, and so that we're going to have percolation problems, and so we need to plan for a SUD scheme. Or you might, as a town planner, you might visit the site and say, well, hold on, there's a problem here. This tree is obstructing our visibility display, you know, getting into the site, and that tree, you know, we could drop it now, or if it's owned by a third party, we need to treat it essentially as if it's protected. And then try and plan around that. And so planners can give a really nice overview about, and we've got a common issue that I think happens is where someone falls in love with building a house in a particular part of the site, probably because it has the best views. But that part of the site may actually be, you know, could for argument's sake be the best place to put a drainage pond. But if you don't do that work beforehand, you won't find that out. And if you've submitted the scheme on or got an approval with the house being in a particular place and find out you then have to move it, you've got to go back right through the planning system to get that changed and make amendments. So taking the right advice at the beginning is where I think where planners add the most value, and planners are very good at managing planning projects. You know, we have at any given time 20 to 30 schemes on the go simultaneously, and we have a good feel for where we think the issues are going to be, and we can advise accordingly at the outset. We don't always get it right, of course.
Yeah, it's a lot more control. Make no apologies that we've got vibrant noise outside. It's brilliant because it's again showing the vibrancy of this place. They're being fed after the big conference that they've got on the go at the moment. It's brilliant. I just love this hive of activity. So if you're wondering if there's noise in the background, if you can, don't panic. It's legitimate. It's supposed to be there. Conscious of the time again, but I'm going to go, and don't disappear down a rabbit hole on this one, Mark. But what is planning permission's number one challenge at the moment for self-builders, and what are the governments doing about this?
Well, in a nutshell, I can answer that succinctly, I promise. So we haven't had a particularly favourable couple of years of policy circumstances, notably since 2017, when the government diluted some of the strong presumption in favour of development in the national planning policy framework. I won't go into the detail, but that changed in 2017. But we've had a change of government, and this government are very committed to driving up housing delivery. So they've set a pretty ambitious target of about 300,000 a year nationally. We've seen most authorities have about a 20% increase in their housing numbers, but importantly, those housing targets are now fixed. Whereas the previous government around Christmas time removed those targets to make them optional, you know, to make them discretionary, which wasn't at all politically motivated. Let me make that clear. But yeah, we all know what happened with the election. So the Labour government have finally drawn the dot between you know, a stagnant economy and a housing crisis, and realised that you can solve two problems at the same time, by just loosening some of the housing constraint policies, which have really become, you know, a problem when you are making as many planning applications as most planning consultants do. Because often you could throw a dart into a map of England and there will be 1 or 2 constraints on there. And what I hope the government don't do is focus on their new idea of grey belt, which is this kind of mediocre green belt, which you might have heard about in the press. Yes, that's part of the solution, but that green belt only covers 13% of the country. So 87% of the country is not in the green belt. So I hope they don't just myopically focus on that as being a solution, a panacea for everyone, and instead realise that we need to have re-engaged that strong positive presumption in favour, which was in, for those planning nerds out there, it was in paragraph 14 of the 2012.
I was going to say, I knew.
But I'm hoping they reinstate something that's more firmly worded around that. And they're obviously out at consultation now, so you can view as bedtime reading the NPPF as it stands. So you're making a note of that.
But I don't need to read paragraph 14 now because I know that
it's paragraph 11 now. But yeah, but you get the point. The government are aware, and it's great to hear politicians at a really high level talking about the need to drive up housing numbers, because for a couple of decades now we have simply under-delivered in this country, and we've also fundamentally are about to change the way we calculate housing needs in an area. So that's a major shift in the planning world. So it used to be based on a kind of the rate at which houses were formed, the formation of households, and taking a percentage of that, but instead it's being taken now on a percentage of the housing stock and then adding about 1% a year onto that, which is a much better way of doing it. And the reason why, as we all know, the formation of a household has been suppressed by high housing prices.
Yeah.
So if you can't buy a house, you aren't forming a household, and therefore it's a self-perpetuating cycle of under-delivery of housing due to the poor numbers going into the calculation at the beginning. So it's great to see that government are aware of that and are changing that.
Fingers crossed, that sounds promising. I know that Harvey and I are really appreciative of you two joining us as experts, and I hope everybody watching equally feels the same. Tom, coming to you first to sort of get towards the wrap-up stage. You're obviously going to be here presenting at the show October 11th and 12th.
Yeah.
A, where can they find you? And B, why should someone come and listen to your talk? What they're going to gain?
Well, it benefits where you're sitting at the moment, but directly behind you, you'll see the Buildstore stand. And as you enter the centre, we're just at the right-hand side. I'll be talking each day in the Build It Theatre. And I think probably the main benefits is one, understanding the journey. They'll realise that this isn't just for the well-heeled third and fourth-time house mover. We Buildstore partner with a number of lenders exclusively and have access to every self-build lender in the UK as an independent mortgage broker. But we've been developing products now for 25 years, and we've funded over 30,000 projects in the UK. There's a large Buildstore town somewhere kicking about. The key on product design is to mitigate risk. It's complicated enough, and we have now, all of our lending partners are now providing us with guaranteed stage payments. So either before the stage begins, you can get the funds in your bank account for that appropriate stage, or if you get perhaps a wee bit more money to put into the pot, you can fund the stage, but you need to make sure you're getting the money back after the stage is completed. Then we've got guaranteed stage payments in arrears. That's probably one of the biggest fears that people have. We've all heard the TV programme, the lender's not giving them any more money. It's not that there's not more money to get, but we had a lending system called valuation-based lending in arrears, where the client funds the stage and only got money back if the value of the site increases. Now, that's only decided by the Chartered Institute Valuer when they go on site. So, in many ways, would I work with a building contractor who would only tell me my build costs when I got to that stage? No, I wouldn't. But we had a lending system that would only tell you how much money you've got once you've got to that stage. That for many people was too risky. And for me, certainly, I would prefer to know what I got at each stage. The seminar and the talk will take them through that particular model and open it up to ensuring that it's not just for the third and fourth time house mover, because with 95% lending, people with a 5% deposit could be designing and building their own home. We can change the demographic of who's actually designing and building their own home. They shouldn't be railroaded into a new build scheme because they think it's their only solution. So it's the top will open it up to more people being able to do this and having a better understanding of how they control their risk and their budget through the self-build mortgage process that Buildstore has in place.
Fabulous. That sums it up brilliantly. And Mark, I'm going to turn and say exactly the same to you, is that where can people find you? What are you up to during the 2 days of the show? And what is someone going to gain from listening to your talk?
So people should definitely attend the show. It's a really good first step. You've got sort of critical mass of all the lenders, of planning experts, architects, designers, building system experts, and you can ask them any questions. You have you book slots, so you can talk for 20 minutes without about any subject that any questions you have, and you can also walk around and meet all the different suppliers as well. So you can spend the entire day here, attend a couple of different shows. There's one on the fascinating subject of town planning. So there's one on town planning. But there's other ones, isn't there? There's finding plots and building systems, etc. So I think as a first step, I can't think of a better first step for someone even contemplating it. And bear in mind, it's not a quick process to go from sort of attending a show to turning a key. That could be a couple of years. You need to be thinking, if you are even faintly thinking about it, you should come along to the show and talk to people, and you'll meet people that have already done it. You'll inevitably rub shoulders with people that have done it or at different steps to you. And I've often found that some clients have been talking to people. So an old client, might be someone from a former client from 2 or 3 years ago, is talking to somebody else from 6 months ago to exchange tips for further down the line. And you're just not going to get that anywhere else. So I think it's a really good thing to do for people to come down. And it's family friendly. There's there's a cafe here as well. So yeah, you should definitely come down.
I think that's it, Chris. So in this digital age, so people at home watching this right now, this is so valuable to be able to be online and engage, quickly with people. But there is something really special and important about engaging people face to face, physically, and having those conversations and hearing those little bits of information from someone that's done it before. It is so invaluable. And also seeing in the trade village behind us, where we've got kind of over 200 exhibitors with all the products that you would need, from floors, doors, solar panels, heat pumps. You can do all your research online, but it is so important to come and touch, feel it, see them working, check the colours. I mean, we're in the Scott Frame House. I mean, Tom mentioned the Renovation House, which is this amazing exhibit that we have here. We're in the Scott Frame House, which is an example of a timber frame home. It's great to be able to come and get some inspiration, even if you think, actually, that's not what we want, but that's given us an idea that we want this instead. We're surrounded by different door examples up here, ironmongery. So
there's no substitute for touching and feeling materials, particularly particularly looking at cladding and things like that.
Yeah, it's very different just looking at pictures on a website. I think actually being able to see it live it is quite special.
But I think one of the other things that is important to me for this facility is that there are ideas out there you haven't had yet.
Exactly.
You said about it's all very well doing your research on the internet, but you can wander around going, I've seen several things. I was like, I did not know that was available.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
quite
even
like
my
that.
own house, I've bought a few different products which I would never have heard about if it wasn't for coming down here.
It's priceless for that, which is why I'm looking forward to it, because we're live through the first day as well.
Very
Aren't we?
exciting.
We've got a number. We'll be over in the what do you call it, the Dale House?
The Dale House, next door to my office.
It will be,
And
keep
you
the
can
noise
find
down.
myself just down behind us in the main square area in the middle.
Well, you'll get clobbered at some point, maybe up for an interview, because we'll be running a number of interviews through the day, but we're also roaming. We're going to go wandering with a portable camera and catching up with some of the exhibitors and the attendees and everything. And that will be on the Friday. And hopefully that means that there'll be people back home that will go, I really need to be at this. And you've still got the ability to get tickets for the Saturday as well.
I think it's worthwhile, Harvey, also highlighting those at the very early stage that we've touched about in various questions, is the fact that plot search is based within the centre. So those who are at that point of actually looking for land, there's a permanent plot search centre with live plots there. They might find their dream project while visiting the centre.
Right,
Yeah.
I need to pick up on that then, and I will. I know I was attempting to wrap up there, but I didn't know that was here, and we were supposed to touch on that a bit more, but we kind of ran out of time, and I wanted to leave you guys with enough to talk about on the days anyway. But so what's this?
So within the Buildstore space, there is as Tom says, there's a plot search. So it's a free online service that Buildstore offers. You can you can subscribe to it, but a bit like if you imagine an estate agent's window, you can actually come to the centre and browse live plots that are available. You know, today, the day of the show,
with permission,
with outline.
Yeah, everything has permission.
Is that right, Tom? I think, yeah.
It won't be on the site if it doesn't have planning permission. So there's plots, barns for conversion, houses for renovation, custom build. Yeah. There's something for everyone right across the UK.
Wow.
And I think that's, Tom mentioned this right at the beginning, actually. So a plot doesn't necessarily need to be this perfect little parcel of field. It could be an existing property. You know, because
with a large side garden or a small house on a big plot.
Yeah, exactly. So I say we run a whole one-day course on finding land and then appraising whether it is a plot or not, as we touched on earlier. So there'll be plenty of people here during both days of the show that will be able to kind of guide you through that and help you understand, you know, what your options are. And another thing, just to really quickly mention, is I find it really frustrating when you go to shows at some of the big arenas and you get charged like £12, £18 to park your car. It is free parking at the centre. And we get so much feedback saying, please keep your parking free, because it, you know, otherwise it's kind of, oh, it's free tickets, but it's going to cost you 18 quid to park your car for the day. Free parking, and we've got 8 EV charging points here at the centre as well.
That's good to know.
Fabulous. No, I mean, it is good. So remember, that's the 11th and 12th of October. We'll be live from here on the 11th.
Friday, Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah. We'll be here on the Friday, not suddenly giving you everything that means you don't need to come here. I can assure you it's not that. We're just going to catch up with a few more interviews during the course of today, like after someone's given a talk, for example, just have a catch up of how it went, chat around the place so that you can get a feel for the vibe that's here, which is really exciting. I can't wait for that. But before that, we've got episode 3 coming up, and that's on Tuesday, the 1st of October. And our subject there that we're focusing on is heat and energy.
Yeah. So one of the most popular topics, really. So probably every other question that we get asked at our help desk is about heating options, renewable technologies, how to improve the energy efficiency of a home. Yeah. So we've got Clarissa from Total Home Environment. She's going to be talking about ventilation and getting the air quality and control in a home exactly right, because that can have a big impact in terms of your energy consumption and also the comfort of living. Being a kind of hay fever sufferer in the spring, summertime, totally, you know, get the benefit of Clarissa's system. Clarissa's business have been an exhibitor at the centre since the day we opened, so 2007. So she knows the centre, she knows the type of people that come in and the problems that they're faced with. So she's going to be really great. And then we've got Rob Bohm coming back, who was here for the first episode, for everyone that watched that. So Rob is an independent heat and energy consultant working for a project management company, but he also, like Mark, presents some of our courses that we run here and spends some of his time on our help desk as well. So
and he's an MC for some of the bit wider events as well.
He is, yeah. So he's got a really great, you know, expansive knowledge that he's here to share with everyone.
That's brilliant. Plus, we'll have, I think we've got Katie and Nick that will be joining us that one as well. And just having a little look at the timetable. So you're talking where you two guys are chatting there, or presenting there, I should say, is we'll have a look through some of the highlights of the timetable and really get people. So if you are either you're getting excited about coming the show or you're still unsure, tune in on Tuesday the 1st, 2 weeks time yesterday. We're on Wednesday today, aren't we? Yeah. 2 weeks yesterday. Tune in. We'll be looking at some of the highlights about it and getting really excited about the live show. Before we go then, Tom, any final words from you, my friend?
No, I think we've touched on some really key parts today. But I think the biggest thing is just to encourage people to come along to the centre, take advantage of the wealth of independent expertise that's in there. No matter what stage you're at, even if you've started your project or at that early stage, come along and don't be put off by the doubters. People will think that try and put you off that this is a stretch too far. Trust me, if I can do this, then any of you can do this, and the centre's the perfect place. to gather the knowledge and the support that you require.
Yeah, I second that, Tom. I think it's a really good day because you're meeting all the right people.
Yes.
And you can't do that online in the same way.
And that comment about don't listen to the doubters. Sometimes that's your own voice as well. And it's good to get those answers put to bed, isn't it?
Yeah, and you are not going to get sold to. That is not the environment or the ethos of the centre here. So we touched on in the first episode, we're an employee-owned team. The guys and girls that run the centre love what we do. We love meeting people, and it is not a kind of hard sell environment at all. It's the complete opposite. It is, you will just find people who are friendly, willing to offer their experience, their advice, their knowledge, and they hear it all the time. People saying, actually, I'm not going to be able to help you. Let me go and introduce you to this person. They've got more experience.
I mean, we often get asked questions about, there might be mechanical heat ventilation recovery systems, and we always send them over to Clarissa, and she often gets asked, do I need permission on a listed building for this type of thing? So there's a lot of interaction actually between the different companies. But it really would help people get the most out of the day with a little bit of preparation, thinking about what they want to get out of it, who they want to meet, and what systems or services they're looking for. That can be really helpful.
And bring if you've even sketched some things down, even if you're embarrassed by them, but they're just
if you own land and bring along a plan. That's really helpful.
No, and if you don't, make sure you get to Buildstore and find the plots that are available. I'm really excited about that one, to be honest with you.
Just a bit of preparation to get the most out of the day.
Love it. And don't panic if you're pre that stage. It's still a great place to come to start getting yourself to some of that planning. There's going to be people at all sorts of stages. Gentlemen, Harvey, Mark, Tom, thank you so much for joining us, guys. I appreciate your time, your expertise.
Absolute pleasure.
Hope the viewers have as well. Thank you for those that have been watching. I've been seeing that we've had some good numbers of you tuning in across the different platforms. It's available to watch back, of course. We've just done this live. This is a visual PR production, which is my company, and I host these things. And the ethos is that this has been a free-flowing conversation. There's no script. There's nothing's been edited or censored. This is these guys using their expertise. Much to Mark's chagrin, he was a bit stressed before we started because I was putting the pressure on you that you had to remember everything. But it's off of everybody's the top of their head, so you know that this is legitimate assistance that we're providing to you. Tune in 2 weeks' time, Tuesday the 1st of October, midday, we'll be back. And as I said, it is this time about heat and energy. And we'll see you then. Cheers all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.